first skill is solving equations with variables in the exponent. And we're going to be dealing with very basic ones to start off with. This one says 6 to the 2c power equals 6 to the 18. And this is the easiest type because the bases are the same. And whenever the bases are the same, it's very simple. You can't solve it unless the variable is down where we're used to it being. And when the bases are the same, what you can do is basically ignore the bases and just set the two exponents equal to each other. To do that, though, the bases have to be the same. So starting off, we're doing little baby problems where the bases are already the same. And we're going to set 2c equal to 18, and c is 9. It doesn't matter what the base is. It could be a wingding, for all we care. We don't use the 6 in the solving of the problem, except for the fact that they have to both be 6, or both be 8, or both be a picture of the White House, or whatever. It doesn't matter. The two bases have to be identical for you to be able to ignore them. And then you set the exponents equal to each other and solve. Okay? I want you to do this one. Negative 35 to the 2p plus 4 equals negative 35 to the p minus 7. Okay, so we're going to ignore the negative 35s. We don't even use them in the problem. And now you have to have some algebra ability. You have to be able to solve for p. Okay, so we're going to subtract that p to the left. We're going to subtract that negative 4 to the right. And we get negative 11. Negative 11 is the only number that you can put in for p to make both sides the same. We're going to be changing the bases. Okay, so here we have 3 to the 2n plus 1 equals 81. The bases are no longer the same. But we really liked it when they were. It was easy. So what we want to do is we want to try to get back to when the bases were the same. So you want to try to change something in the problem so we have the same bases. What?
3 to the 4th power.
81 is 3 to the 4th power. So, you can't change the value of something, but you can change what it looks like. 81 is equal to 3 to the 4th. So you can change 81 to 3 to the 4th, and now look, we have bases that are the same. Now, if it was an 80, that's a different story. That's a much more difficult problem. We can still solve it later on in the chapter, but today the problems are pretty simple. So now we have the same base, and now we're back to our simple problems of ignoring the bases. So we ignore the 3's, and we set 2n plus 1 equal to 4. Subtract the 1 and divide by 2. N is equal to 3/2. Okay? But you have to make that change, and it's different every problem. You have to change one of the bases so it matches up with the other base. Okay, Laura said 81 was 3 to the 4th. Let's try again. 4 to the 9n minus 2 power is equal to 256. So what you have to do, you probably don't know any of it in your head. You have to figure out what 256 is. So you have to kind of play around with it. It's probably 4 to the something. So you kind of guess with your calculator until you figure it out. What is it? It's 4 to the 4th. So you change the 256 to something that's equal to 256. 4 to the 4th. That seems simple to me. And now you can ignore the bases. But they have to be the same to ignore them. All right, now, the reason this one is a little more difficult is because that right side number that we were going to change, it now has something, it has an exponent, which shouldn't affect us too much, but it's a change, and some of us don't accept change very well, so we'll talk through it. We have to change one of those so we have like bases. So what do we want to change, and what are we going to change it to? We want to change the 9 because we want to make it down to a smaller base. What is 9? It's 3 squared. So I'm going to rewrite the problem, only I'm going to erase the 9, and I'm going to put a 3 squared. 3 squared is equal to 9. I'm not changing the value of the equation at all. I'm just changing the look of the 9 so it looks like the other side base-wise. On the right side now we have 2 exponents on the same base. Do you remember how to deal with that? Okay, it's painted on the wall above Brandon's head, above the R in Randy. When you have 2 exponents on the same base, you multiply the exponents together. So we have to take 2 times 2x minus 1, which means we have to distribute it. All rules that we should know. And that becomes 4x minus 2. And look, they have the same base. So we can ignore those bases and set the exponents equal to each other. That's the whole goal, to get us back to the beginning of the lesson where we were all happy and confident. We all knew exactly what was going on. Subtract the 4x to the other side, we get an answer of negative 2. Negative 2 is the only number in the universe that you could plug into that blue equation and both sides would be the same. Okay, let's try one that's more difficult. All right, it's not more difficult, but you try it anyway. Once you have the bases the same, you can ignore the bases and solve for x. X equals 3. Okay. Now let's try one that's more difficult. Any questions on that one? All right. This one adds an inequality to it, which is more fluff than anything. Should not be intimidating. But it adds a fraction. So we're going to have to change the base of that right side. What do we want the base to be? We want matching bases. What do we want our bases to match up to be? 4. We want matching 4s. But we have to think, what is that right side with a base of 4? What does a fraction even mean when you're dealing with exponents? What probably happened? Does anybody know?
4 to the negative 1.
Okay, very good. It probably means that we had to move it to the basement, which means, as Schrocker is saying, probably dealing with some sort of negative exponent. Okay, so you have to play around with it, and what you will find out is that 1 over 256 is 4 to the negative 4. 256, as we found out in an earlier example today, is 4 to the 4. Move it to the bottom, it's 4 to the negative 4, 1 over 256. By practice and experience, you should be able to do those. Realize that putting it in the basement means negative. Okay? our bases are the same. We have an inequality, but that really means nothing. The only thing you have to understand is if you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the sign, all those inequality rules that we've known forever. Okay, so we're going to ignore our bases and solve. Just like that.